Welcome to the Northern Business Podcast, a regular discussion with people who lead businesses, employ people and have new ideas to help our economy grow. The Northern Business Podcast is produced by Recognition PR, which serves businesses in different sectors across the country, some of which occasionally contribute. Now, we're sponsored by Virtue Motors, one of the top automotive retailers in the UK, with a network of dealerships representing some of the world's most popular brands. I'm Graham Robb, and joining us on this edition of the podcast, we have three women with different experiences in business. Amy Mooney has started a new firm, Mutha Cuva, which specialises in servicing heat pumps. Kate Hutchinson runs an organisation called the Sustainability Community, or TSC for short. And in an interview I recorded last week, we'll be hearing from Chief Operating Officer of Family Business UK, Fiona Graham. But let's start with you, Kate, and welcome to the Northern Business Podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, TSC is, you're based in Leeds, but you cover the whole of England, really, don't you?
We do, yes. So we're a Leeds-based company, but with a footprint across the UK, with the belief that the regions are the answer to our problem with net zero.
Well, here. Everyone in the Northern Business Podcast agrees with that. So the answer to net zero, well, first of all, without debating net zero, the issue of net zero has been produced in public discourse as suggesting we need to have opportunities for business from it to solve the issues. What opportunities are now coming forward in the north of England?
So if you look at the economy, the clean industrial growth side of the economy is the fastest growing part. It's growing at a rate of around 10% year on year. Whereas if you look at the rest of the economy, we're sort of stagnating at a growth of maximum 1%. So this is, for me, where the biggest economic opportunity is. And I think the real opportunity is particularly in the North and the Midlands, because we've got our post-industrial heartlands and we have the real chance to take our post-industrial heartlands into the 21st century and for them to be leading the way when it comes to clean industrial growth.
Now, most people who do work on net zero in the business community say that the kind of business opportunities fall into three categories: transport, construction or buildings, and power.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about buildings in a minute because we've got someone who's involved in buildings. What about, let's take transport. Are there commercial opportunities in transport for the net zero agenda, or is it all going to be funding sustainable solutions through more taxpayers and through things like the new railway lines?
So the new railway lines is a really, really great one because obviously that's been in the press today. I believe the figure is 45 billion that they're going to be investing into Northern Power Rail, I want to say is the tagline. So which is fantastic news. And that is a real economic boost. I think one of the challenges that we all know in the northeast, in the north and the northeast, is that we really, really struggle with our rail lines. So being able to put that funding into the system will make a real difference. I know close to us in West Yorkshire, there's going to be a new station in Bradford, which will make a real difference. Leeds, where we're based, that's getting a brand new station at the moment. And there's a lot of really exciting things that are coming from that. I think when you look at what is happening, it's a real mix of public and private sector investment. So we work really closely with partners within DESNZ and DEFRA, and we have really good relationships with the National Wealth Fund as well. And often what you see the National Wealth Fund do is actually give that initial piece of funding that gets things kick-started, and then the private sector will come in and back something. And I think that's really important to get that balance right between the two things.
And the next one I mentioned was power.
Yes.
And I know, because I know Teesside extremely well, that power has been at the centre of some of the green agenda in Teesside. But of course, it's also controversial because some of the funding for the power goes on people's electricity bills, which is not helpful to the man in the street.
Actually, it's really interesting because the price for electricity is set by the gas price. So if the price for electricity was actually set by, say, the wind farms, then the price would be lower. So there's a big argument that's happening out there in public discourse at the moment around actually looking at whether or not gas should set that price going forward. Okay,
now, just a quick bit of debate. I can't let it go without suggesting that now net zero is becoming more contentious. The cost of achieving it, the desirability of achieving it by 2050 rather than letting it take its pace as technological change offers us the opportunity to be more carbon neutral. Do you think that debate is gaining ground and changing the way people are investing and regarding net zero?
I don't think if you look at what the amount of money that's being invested into the industry, it isn't changing that. It's simply a language change. It's all about semantics. So I think if we're, from what we've noticed out there, and you'll know this from a PR perspective, what we've noticed is less people using the word sustainability, less people using the word net zero, and more talk around clean industrial growth. However, the investment, the opportunities, the growth is still in this sector. If you look at the government's industrial strategy that was only released, last year, the fundamental part of it is, centred around growth within this side of the economy. So it's certainly not moving anywhere away from that. I think it's just a case of semantics and language.
I think I agree generally with that. When it comes to something like, let's take transport and cars, I've written a piece that was on LinkedIn and in the Journal newspaper in Newcastle about traffic delays and how the traffic delays, there are more and more traffic delays at the moment because there are more roadworks and the roadworks aren't sequenced as they used to be, and you're not got a minimum length of roadworks, and so you get cars putting more pollution in. So I've had this argument and I've got lots of discourse from people who are basically anti-car, whereas when it comes to green and carbon neutral issues, the issue for me was technology. It wasn't the freedom to choose your own transport space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it comes back down to there needs to be a better mix. So having a better rail transport system in the north will make it a lot easier for us to be able to travel without car. However, the idea that we're ever going to move away from people having cars and travelling by car, for me, seems implausible. It's a bit like saying we're going to get rid of air travel. No, we're not. We're just going to adapt, and we're going to see an increase in sustainable aviation fuel and the direction of travel there. That's my belief anyway. Now,
you host some landmark conferences around the regions of England regularly. Let's talk about what you've recently done and what's coming up.
Yep, so our most recent conference was our Clean Energy Conference, which we delivered in Newcastle with Net Zero North East England. That was a huge success, one of our best conferences yet. We brought more than 400 people together in Newcastle. It was a nationally focused conference, so everything that you see that we do, it's nationally focused, delivered in the regions, with a view that London doesn't have to be the centre of the conversation around net zero. And we can lead the way in the regions. So we really powerfully believe that. So that was in November. Our conference that's coming up next is Circular Economy, which we're doing in Birmingham with the West Midlands Combined Authority. That's set to be a really brilliant event.
That's in February?
That's in February the 5th. And then post that, our Green Finance Conference will be on the 19th of March, and that will be in Leeds. We've got some really exciting announcements coming next week around our partners for that. But we've already secured DESNZ as a headline key national partner for the conference.
So if someone watching or listening is involved in a business that has a sustainable or net zero agenda or has a service that helps that agenda, they can take part in these conferences? Is there a serious cost to it? Is there a way that they can take part?
Yep, so there's multiple different pathways basically. So we're always looking for really great speakers to come and join our lineup. One of the things that we do with all of our panels, you'll see that we have a chair, an anchor institution representative, a corporate rep and an SME rep. And where it's suitable, we also have a youth rep. So we have a whole youth engagement programme where we bring young people to sit next to the CEOs and have those conversations. So there are all sorts of ways that way. There are ways to be a sponsor. There are costs involved to being a sponsor, as you would imagine. And that's how we're funded. So we've been completely funded over the course of the last 3 years since we started by a mix of public and private sector funding that's all been on sponsorship and partnerships.
Now, I'm going to introduce my next guest because I think she probably personifies some of the things you've been telling me about. And
Absolutely.
You know Amy Mooney, she's joining us down the line from Newcastle. And you've got a nice bright logo behind you with your name, Mutha Cuva, because you are a mother and you're covering people's servicing for heat pumps. How did you come about setting up a business like that?
Hi, Graham. Yes, so Mutha Cuva is a relatively new company, and my background is I also have another company, a family business, which is a heating company, a company called Gas Angel Heating. And in that company a few years ago, we started to look into what was going to happen once gas boilers had to be replaced, particularly in new build homes. And there was lots of talk at the time that maybe hydrogen might be able to replace heat in our homes. We now know that that's been completely ruled out. And air source heat pumps, so heat pumps, will replace the majority of the gas boilers. Now, this doesn't impact existing properties at the minute. You don't have to if you take out your gas boiler, you don't have to put a heat pump in. But in new build homes, we need to now reduce the amount of emissions, and we can't have gas boilers in there anymore. So, in the vast majority of places, air source heat pumps are going in. So in the old company, my other company, we decided to retrain and learn all about renewable heating, and just came a little bit obsessed with it, to be quite honest. That company designs and installs the heat pumps based here in the Northeast and serving Northeast households. But what we were finding, I'm actually a marketer by trade. And so when I was kind of doing my SEO and creating content for heat pump installations, we were getting queries from households across the UK, finding us online and complaining that they couldn't find anybody to help them. They'd had their heat pump installed. There wasn't anyone available to service it. They had no heating and hot water. Could we visit? And so, unfortunately, we said no. We tried to then help point them in the right direction of some other local providers. But that's when we realised that there was a huge shortage. So we started to build a bit of a wait list, and that wait list grew much quicker than what we anticipated. And we realised that this is it's a big problem that needs to be solved, but it's also a huge opportunity.
Yeah, a waiting list is a business opportunity at all stages, isn't it? Absolutely.
It is.
So you've got householders who fitted and early adopters to heat pumps, and these heat pumps sometimes go wrong. They tend to be quite reliable, but they sometimes go wrong. And they do need servicing as well, or checking, don't they? Yeah,
they do, absolutely. And so when you get a new heat pump installed, a little bit like a new boiler, really, you need to have your heat pump serviced annually. You need to have it serviced annually to make sure that it's maintained properly and that that it's efficient and that your house is nice and warm and your bills aren't too high. But you also need to have it serviced to keep the manufacturer's warranty valid as well. And what we're finding is there have been a lot of people over the last few years who have had heat pumps installed through grants, and unfortunately the heat pump maybe hasn't been installed correctly, or the system hasn't been designed properly, so there maybe hasn't been enough radiators installed, or the controls haven't been set up, or often there's a real lack of education. So sometimes when heat pumps are installed under grants, they're subcontracted down, and the handover doesn't happen very well. So we've got a lot of customers with heat pumps right now who don't know how to use them properly. You use a heat pump in a very different way to how you do a gas boiler. You should leave it on at all times. You shouldn't have your thermostatic radiator valves on. We need an open loop system. And we're used with gas boilers to turn it on and off whenever we're hot or cold. We don't do that with a heat pump. So yeah, there's a big education piece as well that we can help with.
This business, she's well into it, isn't she? Stage one is to fit a new product. Stage two is to service and maintain it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me, Amy, how many heat pumps, what's the market that you've got to go at to sell your cover? Because you sell people service plans, don't you?
Yes, so it's one of the fastest growing. So the UK last year was the fastest growing market across the whole of the world in terms of heat pump installations. And it's interesting when we read the news stories, we talk about people having heat pumps, and you just mentioned it there, Graham. We call them early adopters, but you need to have, I think it's around about, is it a 2% market share to be classed as an early adopter, and we're not even there with heat pumps yet. We've got millions of households that are still on gas boilers. More than 80% of the UK are still on gas boilers, so a huge opportunity. But the big benefit for us is that the Future Home Standards has now been announced, which effectively makes it illegal to put a gas boiler into a new build property. So we know that on average we tend to build around about 200,000 homes a year here in the UK. There's now government targets to build a lot more than that. So with each new property that goes up, we're getting a new heat pump to put into it. So we know exactly where the heat pumps will be, and we know the level of growth. But then there's also lots of incentives to people who have got gas boilers. So at the moment, if you rip out your gas boiler and stick in a heat pump, you get a £7,500 grant. It's not means tested. Everybody gets that. So yeah, we're not being forced to take out our current gas boilers in our existing homes. We're more being encouraged. So it's a bit of carrot and stick, but the stick side of things are on the new build developers.
A lot of people want to know about the cost of running these new devices and also the cost of maintaining them. Now, what's your service plan cost, and what's the average cost of running a heat pump compared to a gas system?
Yeah, so our service plans start from £15 per month, and you get your first service half price as well. So that's we're going in really competitive to really try and get as many customers on board as we possibly can, starting here in the northeast and then expanding out across the rest of the UK. But in terms of the cost of running a heat pump, what we've got to remember is that a heat pump is so we measure the efficiency of a heat pump with something called a SCOP, and on average, a heat pump should be around about 400% more efficient than a gas boiler. A gas boiler can't get up to 100% efficiency. We talk about it being in the 90s, but even still, there's not very many gas boilers that we go out to in my other company where it is that. So the issue that we've got is that the cost of electricity is also 4 times more expensive than gas. So it's really imperative that the heat pump has been installed correctly, is commissioned and set up correctly, and is controlled to modulate with outside air temperature through weather compensation. So that must be set up right. And if that's the case, then it should be at that stage exactly the same price as the gas boiler. But I think, Graham, you mentioned earlier in our chats that you've got solar panels and you've got battery storage. So if you then go on to add solar and battery storage, well, it can be way cheaper, and often the grid can owe you money, so your bills can be zero.
Oh no, that's my aspiration. In my house, I do have batteries and solar, but I think it's in my case, I live in a country and I have oil central heating, so I have to try and compensate somehow. Listen, I have to give a full disclosure because it's absolutely right and proper. You are a new business and you've sought private investment through crowdfunding, and I was pleased to be one of your crowdfunding investors. So I wish you the very best of luck, and I hope that it goes from strength to strength. Thank you very much indeed, Amy. And Anita, I suppose she does personify what you're trying to encourage, does Amy?
Yeah, absolutely. And Amy actually spoke for us at the recent Clean Energy Conference and was talking about the regional opportunities in this sector and the real opportunities for us to benefit as a region, as the North, from the growth.
Well, look, Anita, thanks for coming in, and thank you, Amy, and we'll take on board all of the nice virtue signalling messages, but also the practical money making ones, which is also just as important on the Northern Business Podcast. Now let's turn to something different. Here's a little bit of a different approach on something that I recorded last week. Welcome to a special for the Northern Business Podcast. I'm joined by Fiona Graham in Middlesbrough, at the headquarters of AV Dawson, the Staithes, and behind us you can see the magnificent Transporter Bridge. But Fiona, it's been very good of you to come up from London because you run, as Chief Operating Officer, Family Business UK. Why is this company, AV Dawson, special to you?
I think AV Dawson is a great example of a family business that is really rooted in its community, that understands its community, that is giving back not only through employment and investment, but also through all the community work that they do as well. It's an absolute kind of example of all of the great things that family businesses are about. It's long-term in its outlook, it's thinking about the future, it's investing and growing, all fantastic example, a fantastic example of all of the things that we know family businesses are doing up and down the country.
Now, we're at AV Dawson because they're kindly hosting a briefing about family businesses and their role in the economy in the first week of January 26, as we're recording this. Now, the northeast of England has quite a large cohort of family businesses.
Yeah, it's got about 155,000 family businesses, not all of which employ people. About 30,000 of those employ people. And that's about 430,000 people employed by family businesses up here. which is incredible, really. I think people don't necessarily always understand or appreciate how many family businesses there are in the UK. It's often something people think about. Family business is something that we used to have. People think about great family businesses that used to exist, but actually family business is really thriving in the UK. It's an incredibly important part of the economic impact in the UK, but also, as I said, that community role that they play. Family businesses are so firmly rooted in their communities, and they're making a difference every day.
Now, your organisation, Family Business UK, represents these organisations. How do you define, for membership purposes, being a family business?
So many of our businesses are multi-generational family businesses. So they have been in the same family for many generations, and there is kind of a family that owns them. But increasingly, we're seeing kind of what we will call first-generation family businesses, founders and entrepreneurs who started a business and want to grow it and keep it in the family business, in the family for the long term, whether that's their children are coming into the business or they set it up with a sibling, because people kind of want to see that all that hard work isn't just going to disappear with the owners who maybe in the future aren't going to kind of appreciate it or look after the employees. They want to kind of have an element of control moving forward, so they want it to stay in the family longer term.
Now, there are a number of challenges that family businesses face over the next year. I suppose they fall into costs, regulation, and also future planning. So let's pick on those one by one. First of all, business employment costs have been hit recently. Has that had an impact on your members?
Yeah, I think, with all of the costs that have come around, significant increases in the minimum wage, increases around costs around regulation that are going to come with the Employment Rights Bill. These are huge changes for family businesses, and the cost of employing people is going up and has gone up vastly over the past few years. And that's a real challenge because family businesses want to create jobs and they want to employ people. We need to try and encourage more family businesses to employ people, not make it harder for them to do so. So yeah, the cost increases there are enormous and really challenging.
And regulation, what's the point of view that you have as a membership group on the regulation that's currently changing? Different ones.
So I think one of the biggest challenges for family businesses comes when there's this constant upheaval around regulation. What feels like to civil servants in London, like small changes, can actually have a huge knock-on impact. And in a family business where you've got quite a tight management team, where you don't have huge departments of anything, often it's the owners who have to be experts in pensions regulation, employment, health and safety, all of these things. So every time there's a change in one area, has a knock-on impact across whole areas of the business. And so what family business owners and managers often end up doing is spending a huge amount of time thinking about regulation and compliance, not about growth and strategy. And so for us, it's about kind of really taking a clear look at, okay, what should a good regulatory landscape look like? How can we make it as streamlined and as straightforward as possible? And how can we make sure it is stable for the long term rather than kind of incremental and constant changes, which just are hugely disruptive to anybody who's actually running a business?
Now, there was a change in Labour's first budget, which has really got your members agitated, and you've done something about it. So let's first of all remind people what the change was. I'm talking about BPR, inheritance tax.
Yeah. So for inheritance tax, there has been for many decades a relief called business property relief. And for the farming side of things, there's been agricultural property relief. And what that has meant historically is that 100% of the business has been exempt from inheritance tax when you pass it off from one generation to the next when the owner dies. It's been an incredibly stable regime, and for family businesses have been planning their succession based on that for a long time. What happened in October of 2024 at Rachel Reeves' first budget was she announced a cap on that 100% relief. So 100% relief was only going to be applicable up to £1 million, and above that you would get 50% relief, which would mean above £1 million you would pay 20% inheritance tax on the rest of your estate, which is a huge additional cost for family businesses, and is going to, or has already, seen businesses cut back on investment, on job creation, and has hugely destabilised the family business community. People have spent a lot of time thinking about this and planning for this to try and understand what impact it's going to have.
Now, the government has made a small change, which has helped the smaller family businesses as a result of your lobbying and the case you presented. What change did the government make?
So there's been two significant changes recently. So at the budget, the Chancellor announced that the spousal allowance, spousal exemptions will actually be transferable, because originally it was you had your £1 million of relief, and you couldn't then, if you didn't use it, transfer it to your spouse as you can with normal IHT reliefs. So that's one improvement that was made. The other improvement was that 1 million threshold has now been extended to 2.5 million. So for smaller businesses, as you say, or family businesses where there's maybe lots of shareholders, and so they each have owned a smaller part of the business, that'll make a really big impact. But we're still really concerned about the disincentive this then has for businesses to grow beyond that. If a business can see this threshold looming and thinking, well, I don't want to leave my kids with a huge inheritance tax bill, I might just not grow the business, or I'm getting to a certain age, I'll just hold back on investment for now, and it can be the next generation's job. We shouldn't be putting in place tax rules that are going to disincentivize growth, and that's what this one really does.
Now, I had a good example of this in my own client cohort. I can't tell you its company name, they want to keep it private, but the company was valued at around 300 million a couple of years ago, so there's no question on the valuation. And 300 million, when it was passed to the next generation, would have resulted in a tax bill of 60 million. And it still would, because the threshold hasn't changed that much. And the owner is 75 years old. So you can imagine that the children are very, very concerned about that. And it's caused a lot of anxiety and a lot of consideration on where the company is located, what its investment policies are. Now, you take that kind of company, of which there are many, you've done research and looked at the economic impact of the changes to this relief. What did you find out for the north of England?
So for the northeast, we found that this is already having an impact. So the northeast is one of the areas that is the most affected by these changes, according to the research that we did with CBI Economics. And that research looked at nearly 4,500 companies and what changes they had made immediately in the aftermath of the budget and what they expected to make with the upcoming years to the end of the Parliament. And we see that in the northeast, that's going to mean a decrease of about 8,500 jobs, which is an enormous number. And across the whole of the UK, it's 200,000 jobs. At a time when we really need more people to be getting to work, and we need to be trying to create jobs, that's a real challenge and a real problem. What the research also showed is that actually this is potentially going to have a net loss to the Treasury because of the impact on investment and growth, job creation. It's going to end up costing Treasury money because these businesses aren't going to be paying as much in corporation tax and employment taxes and things like that. Certainly a very, very short-term kind of policy in terms of its thinking about the impact about the benefit it can bring, because it's not going to raise tax, it's going to hit investment, it's going to hit growth, and it's going to hit long-term stable businesses, the kind of businesses that we want to be supporting for the long term.
Finally, Fiona, we're in the shadow of the Transporter Bridge in the northeast of England. You're seeing real businesses operating. You just look at the landscape and see lots of sheds. All of those businesses are privately owned and most are family owned. Tell me, how does a business join Family Business UK, and is it expensive?
It's not expensive. It's very reasonably priced. And you can join by going on our website, familybusinessuk.org. And what we're here to do is to help family businesses, not only with the lobbying advocacy side of things, but also with all of the challenges that come with running a family business, whether that's how you engage your next generation or how you kind of set up some family governance. We're here to help family businesses at every stage of their journey through learning, events, peer networking, advice. And we're here for every family business, whether you have just started up or whether you've been going for 300 years, there's a place for you within our community.
Thank you, Fiona. And if you run or own a family business and you want to feature on the Northern Business Podcast, do get in touch with us on LinkedIn. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, my technical operator, Robin Cannell.